Start here. President Trump standing firm on his tariff policy, pledging that these tariffs will bring back manufacturing jobs and provide funding for tax cuts that the American people badly want. Now, China's responding with retaliatory 34% tariffs on the United States. Those are set to begin on April 10th. Meanwhile, House Democrats, this is interesting, are trying to stand in the president's way with a vote to undo his national emergency declaration, that order that will give him tariff authority. But this newfound hatred of tariffs from the left stands in stark opposition to what Democrats were saying in the past. Roll the tape.
In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal?
What they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street.
We had a tire case in which they were flooding us with cheap domestic tires or cheap Chinese tires. And we put a stop to it. And as a consequence, saved jobs throughout America.
Emily, the context to that Obama soundbite is that he implemented, oh, wait for it, tariffs on China. I believe they were to the tune of 35%. So, oh, how interesting how you just have this riveting change in heart when the guy's named Donald Trump.
Well, I'm glad that you provided this walk down memory lane, Kaylee, because the reality is that the mainstream media and these lawmakers are clearly amnesiac, right? And at the end of the day, when we have these retaliatory tariffs from China, this is the same country that sent spy balloons throughout our country. It's the same country that for decades now has infiltrated multiple sectors, intellectual property, physical, economic. The list goes on of the thieving that has happened. And it's the same country that lied about the release of a disease that became a deadly global epidemic. So I am grateful for a commander-in-chief that has the business acumen to go in saying this is an audit that we need. This is the most open economy on the planet, the most easy economy on the planet with the lowest tariffs. When did it become a right, not a privilege, to participate in the American economy? He has talked about that we will expect growing pains. And I think in the vein of the general malaise of the past, to have a commander-in-chief, again, that has strong and sort of maintains this attitude of like, yeah, it's going to be a bumpy ride for a minute, but it's going to be worth it. And mind you, with the backing of these unions, I think everyone take heart, put on your seatbelts. It might be a bumpy for a little bit, but at the end of the day, America is going to be so much stronger for it. Good blue-collar jobs, to quote the auto workers union, that will happen in a matter of months. And I think we will see the ship right itself soon. But I personally have my faith in the commander-in-chief. And it seems like the Pelosi and Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama of the past do too.
They should be cheering him on. Their old selves would have. I want to pull up the single best tweet I have seen about tariffs. It comes from Cynical Publius, and here's what he said. Those arguing against the Trump tariffs are all members of the intelligentsia who earn their livings at a keyboard and/or a microphone. So the media. No one with callous hands who watched their families descend into despair and fentanyl as manufacturing industries fled their communities opposes what Trump is doing. He went on in a different tweet to say, those who are screeching the loudest are those who have been wrong. And it occurred to me, Tommy, remember when Donald Trump was a Russian operative? I do. That's what the media told us. Remember when the Hunter Biden laptop was misinformation? I do. Remember when Donald Trump could never win an election, nevertheless a primary? I remember that. And remember when COVID could have never originated in a lab? All those voices are the same ones telling us this will be a disaster. Now, that doesn't mean this is all going to work out, but I'm willing to bet against those voices.
I'm also glad that you brought up COVID, because I've been talking about this all week. These same people that are now in hysterics over these tariffs didn't seem to have much of a problem. We shut the entire country down for a year plus, destroyed the supply chain, destroyed lives over COVID. They were okay with that. That was a risk they were willing to take in the name of COVID. But now they're panicking. That aside, if not President Trump, who would do this? He, to your point, has a record of making tough decisions, explaining them to the American people, why he has to do them. But if he didn't do it, who would do it? It's the same thing with DOJ. Everyone talks about we need to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. But when it comes down to actually making the cuts, nobody wants to stick their neck out. Nobody wants to do it. Same thing with tariffs. This needed to be done. We could not just continue this way in perpetuity. Somebody needed to do it. This president is bold, and he's standing in the fact that he's going to trust this process. He campaigned on it, and now he's actually doing it, and they're going into hysterics. Trust the process. Someone needed to do this and put America first. He's going to be the one to do it. Everyone's going to panic for a few weeks, but in the long term, my money is on President Trump.
Yeah, it's a safe place to put your money if history is any indicator. You know, Griff, yesterday there were a number of people on the president's team who came out and said this is not a negotiation, not a negotiation. President Trump was asked this on Air Force One. Is this a negotiation with other countries? Here's what he said.
We have a set of tariffs based on what they've been charging us. That's reciprocal. And those tariffs have come in, and every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat. If we would have asked some of these countries, almost most of these countries, to do us a favor, they would have said no. Now they'll do anything for us.
He goes on in that same gaggle to say, yeah, I'm willing to negotiate. So maybe it was his team posturing, and then he's saying I'm the great negotiator coming in to close the deal.
Well, and playing a little bit off of what Tommy said, look, he campaigned on this. In fact, he's been talking about unfair trade deficits and reciprocal tariff mindsets since he wrote a book in 1987 called Art of the Deal. He tried a little bit of it in the first term. Now he's thought about it in the 4 years off, and he's all in. You know, I would say this. When we see him actually doing what he told us he was going to do on the campaign trail, I look at the border. We just had the lowest crossings in history at the border, something he also campaigned on. Bill Maloogian and I, if we're being honest, would have told you we never would have thought in the first 100 days you would get it to there because the crisis was so real. Now you've got people white-knuckling as we speak because Nintendo 2 isn't going to release the Switch 2. Another reason. And in fairness, the market drop is a real thing, but it's not like he didn't tell us also that that was going to happen. And so I think as we go forward and sort of analyze and report on exactly what's happening in the tariffs with each country, I think you're going to see perhaps a little bit more of the fruit. So I think really to their point, patience is probably the smarter play here for now.
Cheryl, you're the expert on this, and I've been wanting to hear your thoughts all morning because the news today is China hit us with the 34% tariff. Trump sent this out. China played it wrong. They panicked. The one thing is this, that they cannot afford to do. So what does that mean? Do you think he takes a play against China? Where are we at?
Well, I think that what the president and what many have talked about is the art of the deal. And you're right. Donald Trump has been talking about unfair tariffs against our nation since he wrote a book, and this is decades in the making. The China-United States fight is decades in the making. This has been going on for 20 years. China entered the WTO back in 2001. We've spent a lot of years getting cheap stuff. That is likely going to end, at least for now. iPhones are going to be $2,300. That's the reality. And look, that's why a lot of the market is selling off, because they're realizing that the global supply chain is about to be completely upended. But if you look at the decline of the American worker and the shrinking of the American factory and the loss of American jobs, it is because of China. I've always said we enabled China as a nation, and I'm going back 20 years. I'm not talking about right now. So the fight against China that Donald Trump has brought to the table has been successful and needed to happen. In his first term, tariffs against China were successful. They weren't this extreme. And then you had Joe Biden, who didn't enforce what was supposed to be happening. China was supposed to be buying American agricultural products. You know what? They did not. And he didn't enforce it. So they've had 4 years of a break, and now that break is over for China. As far as the market goes, though, I have to say, yes, there are a lot of big companies that have exposure to China, and that is why the market is very concerned and has every right to be. The bigger picture is that we pull back. I think that, and I believe this, I think reciprocal tariffs would have gone over easier with market participants than the charts that they pulled out into the Rose Garden on Wednesday. When they saw the different percentages, and I think that's when the market said, wait a minute, this is a little more dicey than we wanted to see. But I think the reciprocal would have gone over just a little bit.
Did you say $2,300 iPhones?
Yeah. Automobiles are going to go up $4,000, $5,000, $7,000.
Wow.
But negotiate. Wall Street wants Trump to negotiate. Let's start talking. Let's figure this out.
Yeah, don't drop this guy and make sure you have Apple Care.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.